Okay, we're continuing with my quote. We're going in alphabetical order. We're on the letter L. First person is John Linsday. He says, those who suppress freedom always do so in the name of law and order. Yeah, that's pretty well known. So when the tyrant wants to do something illegal and break the Constitution, they'll just say, it's because there's an emergency. I had to do it. Always be suspicious of that. Always be skeptical of that. Because a lot of bad stuff gets done in a crisis. They pretend it's helping you, but then it's used against you. Okay, John Lindsay says, the miniskirt enables young ladies to run faster. Because of it, they may have to. Okay. All right, Bruce Lipton. He's a pretty smart cell biologist guy. He wrote a couple clever books. Sometimes he gets a little bit into the woo-woo and he becomes a BS artist, but he's also pretty smart. He said a few good things. He says the membrane is the membrane of the cell, and I thought that was intelligent. That the DNA is just a blueprint for storing information, but it doesn't do anything. It's the cell membrane that interacts with the external environment and decides what the cells should do to activate different types of gene expression. Okay. He says DNA is just a blueprint. The epigenetics is a contractor, and that is correct. They're the transcription based on what the cell receptors bind on the plasma membrane. He says a typo can be significant. There's a big difference between celebrate and celebrate. When a person is sick, the problem is usually the environment of the cells, not the DNA. This empowers the person to try to change their cellular environment. That's another thing too. You'll hear a lot of modern medical centers and books and classes emphasizing genetic medicine. It's a joke, okay? There's very little genetic difference between people. And you'll never hear them talk about the environment, diet, lifestyle, toxicology. Okay, Bruce Lipton. Repetition is how you train the subconscious. Tell it positive things like, I am good, I am strong, I am smart, and it will hear and believe these things. Kind of like the affirmations of Brian Tracy. And I used to do that for myself. I would say that to myself. When I'm getting psyched up to do something big, I say, I can do it, I can do it. And that gets me psyched up. It just does. Because you got to convince yourself you can do it to make you go for it, Because I'll have in my mind's eye, a typical thing for me is writing another book. And I got to get myself convinced this is worth doing, this is good, and then I got the energy to do it. Okay, then the hero for today, in terms of our main focus, is going to be on Livy. Livy was a historian in ancient Rome. He lived from 59 BC to 17 AD, so he overlapped quite a bit there with Augustus, Octavian Caesar, who began the empire phase of ancient Rome. So ancient Rome had sort of three phases. It had a monarchy, then it was a republic, and then it was the empire. Okay, and he's in that long line of great Roman historians like Polybius, Sallust, Tacitus, and then later on Gibbons, for example. Livy emphasized the values of a good Roman, so of course he admired the republic. He was he wrote 142 volumes of history. Unfortunately, we only got 35 of them. Okay, but there's a reason why this could happen. It was possible for Livy to write so much history because Rome kept public records, so he had a lot of material to study. It was sort of a worldwide history because Rome kind of controlled most of the known world at that time. And this is totally different from the Greek historians like, let's say, Horatius, who wrote about the Persian War, Xenophon, who wrote about Anabasis, Thucydides, who wrote about the Peloponnesian War, because it was things that they had contemporary local experience with, so they could do that. But there were no public records in Greece, so nobody could write about like the whole history of the ancient Greeks. In a sense, that would have been very difficult to do. Livy wrote a lot of the great stories that people know about the history of Rome. The great Horatius defending Rome at the bridge against the Etruscans. Okay, Mucius, who to show Lars Porsena, king of the Etruscans, that he was just one of many Romans who would be willing to risk their life to fight the Etruscans, and he let his wrist burn over the fire. And if you read the story, it's all quite heroic, and this is things etched in the minds of the Romans to know the history of their people and their ancestors. The story of Lucretia, who was raped, and what happened, and then she committed suicide. Her brother avenged her. These are all the basic stories of Rome. Tarquin, the evil ruler, came into power in Rome. The plebeians were the peasants in Rome. The tribunes were their messengers. Patricians were the aristocrats. When Greece allied itself with Carthage, that pissed off Rome, and then the Romans went and decided to teach the Greeks a lesson and conquered them. But the thing that was a big deal was after the fall of Carthage, the Romans became lazy and they started becoming immoral, unmotivated. And Livy was concerned because he thought that this was Rome slipping into decadence. and the decline in its moral was weakening Rome. So this is a little bit like the idea that the Soviet Union pretended to collapse, let's say, in 1989, but I think it was kind of a fake collapse, part of a plan by global communism to put the Christian world to sleep. Oh, Russia's collapsed. The communism is collapsing. It really can't do much anymore. It's no longer a big obstacle threat to the United States. But in reality, I think it was a fake collapse. I think, why did Gorbachev move to the United States? So he can continue plotting and scheming, okay? So anyways, yeah, and who admires Gorbachev? Who would name his daughter after him? Okay, getting back to reality. Livy, admired the old values of Rome, the Roman Republic. He thought that conquered people were better off under Roman control. And I'm not sure they would agree with that. But here's some of Livy's quotes. The study of history is the best medicine for the mind. For in history you have a record of the variety of human experience plainly set out for all to see. And in that record you can find for yourself and your country both examples and warnings, good things to take as models and bad things that are rotten through and through to avoid. Yeah, and I think all young people should be taught history from the perspective of the great people of history, so they'll remember those stories. It had a tremendous positive influence on me to want to write like Plato did in terms of his form of the dialogue, the dialectic, like a play, like a conversation, even though my personal philosophy is 100 times more in line with Aristotle, sort of the Catholic Aristotelian philosophy. I'm glad I learned about Thomas Aquinas because I identify with him. I think I'm sort of a combination of a modern Thomas Aquinas and Aristotle. Aristotle in wanting to classify and categorize and summarize the useful information of the time. Aquinas in the sense of trying to be a unifier of faith and reason, because I know you can't have good science without Catholic ethics. Otherwise, it just becomes a big joke. It becomes advertising for the big money corporations. Okay? So let us continue with Livy. And also Napoleon had said the same thing. Study history. That's where you'll get the truth about mankind. Okay, Livy says, he is truly a man who will not permit himself to be overexcited when fortune's breeze is favorable, or cast down when it is adverse. When Tarquin the Proud, the last king of Rome, a usurper whose tyrannical behavior led the Romans to get rid of the monarchy, was asked what is the best mode of governing a conquered city, he replied, only by beating down with his staff the tallest poppies in his garden. And this is the origin of the concept of poppy syndrome, tall poppy syndrome, that basically the tall poppy that sticks up is the one that gets smacked, okay? And that's a little bit like how modern conventional medicine is run. That's why I'm always a little afraid, because I'm pretty superior to other doctors in the conventional medicine, and they don't like that. I can assure you, they don't like that. So I keep a low profile in conventional medicine because it's so stupid. It's a clown circus, okay? It has virtually no interest in understanding pathophysiology, but understanding pathophysiology is the most important thing. Okay, Livy continues. He says, adversity makes men remember God. Yeah, that's why people do better when they understand they have to work hard and be faithful to God. Livy continues, greed and luxury, those evils which have been the ruin of every great country. Shared danger is the strongest of bonds. It will keep men united in spite of mutual dislike and suspicion. Yes, America was better off when it was afraid of Russia. Livy continues, truth is often eclipsed but never extinguished. Yes, the truth is fragile, and that's what we're trying to do on this YouTube channel, is keep it alive for nutrition and health and for Western civilization. Livy, it takes a long time to bring excellence to maturity. Yes, the last feature of man, as Schopenhauer said, to develop is judgment. Livy continues, in grave difficulties with little hope, the boldest measures are safest. Fortune favors the brave. Livy continues, the outstanding man is he who thinks deeply about a problem, and next, he who listens carefully to advice. Okay, that's all we got for Livy, the ancient Roman historian. I hope you found that helpful.